Snow drifted across the shattered tree-line like ash from some ancient fire, blurring the line between sky and earth. In the frozen silence of the Eastern Front, even the sound of footsteps could vanish before they reached the air. But on that morning in January 1944, the quiet was broken by something unmistakable, something heavy, metallic, and terrifying. German tracks. And for the men of the 27th Guards Rifle Division, it meant only one thing. A tiger was coming. Soldiers who had survived Kursk and Kharkov instinctively stiffened, because the tiger wasn't just another tank. It was a legend made of steel and fear. Its armor could shrug off most Soviet rifles and anti-tank rounds like raindrops. Its 88mm cannon could rip open a T-34 at distances so long that the victims never even saw it coming. The Germans called it Tiger, but to Eastern Front infantry, alone in the frozen forests, it felt more like an unstoppable creature, a mechanical predator built to rule the battlefield. Yet in the trenches that morning stood a man who didn't look like a hero. His name was Sergeant Mikhail Dorokhin, a quiet, wiry veteran with a narrow face, frostbitten hands, and an uncanny instinct for survival. He wasn't famous. He wasn't a decorated commander. He was simply someone who had seen too much war to be afraid of anything anymore. Or at least that's what his men believed. Dorokhin had fought since the first days of Barbarossa, retreating, regrouping, counterattacking, and pushing west with the Red Army's relentless momentum. He had watched whole companies vanish in the snows of 1941, watched villages burn, watched steel clash against steel. And from all of it, he had learned one truth. Nothing is invincible, not even a tiger. The night before the attack, Dorokhin sat beside a dying campfire, sharpening a long steel punch, an improvised anti-tank tool scavenged from a destroyed workshop. His comrades watched him, confused. No one expected him to use it. After all, what use was a hand tool against a tiger tank? But Dorokhin simply smiled, a tired, knowing smile, and said only, "Every beast has a weak spot. You just need to get close enough." Close enough. The words hung in the cold night like a warning. The next morning, scouts reported the unmistakable rumble of a tiger spearheading a small armored push along a forest road. The Soviets had no heavy anti-tank guns positioned nearby, no minefields, no artillery ready to fire. It was infantry and a few grenades against one of the deadliest machines on Earth. Panic flickered through the foxholes. Men checked their rifles, knowing they would be useless. Some whispered prayers. Others cursed the cold and their luck. But Dorokhin remained calm, scanning the tree-line with the certainty of a hunter. He understood the physics of tanks, not from books, but from surviving them. He had watched crews panic when their vision slits were blocked, seen tigers stall in deep snow, heard stories of their gears freezing solid. And he knew something else, the place every tiger crew feared. The engine deck, the one area where even German engineers couldn't fully protect the beast. Vents, cooling grills, maintenance hatches, necessary weaknesses in an otherwise impenetrable shell. If someone could get onto the tiger, if someone could strike the engine through those vents, if someone had the nerve. When the first shells exploded among the Soviet positions, Dorokhin knew his moment was coming. The tiger rolled out of the morning fog, its turrets scanning, its engine roaring like an animal that sensed its prey. Snow churned beneath its treads. The tank seemed to swallow the landscape, dwarfing the men scrambling for cover. A burst from its 88mm cannon tore apart a dugout, scattering debris and snow across the trench line. The infantry ducked deeper into their positions, shouting for someone, anyone, to find an anti-tank weapon. But they had none left. They were alone. Dorokhin wiped the frost from his eyebrows, clutched the steel punch to his chest, and whispered, "Now." He sprinted. His boots sank into the snow, breath turning into clouds as he darted from crater to crater. Machine gun rounds chewed the ground where he'd been seconds before. The tiger's bow gunner spotted movement and opened fire. Tracers sliced past him, burning red streaks through the white world. Yet Dorokhin didn't slow. He knew the danger. He knew the odds. But he also knew that if the tiger wasn't stopped here, the entire Soviet flank could collapse. His comrades stared in disbelief. Some shouted for him to come back. Others simply watched, unable to understand what kind of man ran toward a tiger instead of away from it. Dorokhin reached the fallen pine tree that lay just meters from the tank. He pressed against its frozen trunk as the tiger rolled past, its steel mass shaking the earth beneath him. He could see the exhaust pipes glowing from the engine strain. He could hear the shouts of the crew inside. He could smell diesel, mud, and burning oil. He was close enough to touch it, and that was exactly what he intended to do. The Tiger's engine roared like a furnace as it pushed forward, turret sweeping left and right for targets. The crew inside felt confident, almost untouchable. They had survived ambushes before. They had punched through Soviet lines countless times. And in their minds, no lone infantryman could ever threaten 50 tons of German steel. But Sergeant Mikhail Dorokhin knew something they didn't. The forest around them wasn't as empty as it looked. Every log, every hollow, every crater was a possible hiding place for a man willing to risk everything. He waited, pressed against the fallen pine as the massive tank crawled past him. Snow crumbled under its tracks. The vibration shook through his bones. He felt the heat radiating from the engine, melting the frost around the exhaust pipes. The crew had no idea he was there, just inches from the flank of their prized war machine. Then, for a brief moment, the Tiger slowed to adjust its angle, its turret turning toward a distant foxhole where Soviet riflemen fired desperately. That movement created a blind zone on the rear left side of the tank. Dorokhin knew this window would last only seconds. He moved. With a burst of speed, he emerged from behind the log and grabbed the tank's rear tow hook. Using it like a ladder rung, he pulled himself up, boots scraping the armored plates. The steel was hot through his gloves, vibrating like a living thing. The Tiger's engine revved harder. Either the driver sensed something, or they were simply preparing to fire again. Dorokhin climbed anyway. In that moment, he was exposed. Any German infantryman could have shot him. Any crew member could have opened a hatch and ended his life instantly. But war isn't always about what should happen. Sometimes it's about the single moment when the impossible is overlooked. He reached the engine deck, flat, wide, covered with grills, vents, and access plates. The one place where the Tiger's armor was thinnest. He slid the steel punch from his coat and braced himself. Down below, the Soviet infantry watched, stunned. One soldier later wrote in his diary, "It was like watching a man climb onto the back of a bear. We could hardly breathe." Dorokhin found the largest cooling grill and jammed the steel punch between its metal slats. The engine beneath roared, glowing with heat. He knew the Tiger's Maybach engine was both powerful and delicate. Too much debris, too much damage, and it would seize. If he could break just one key component, he swung. The first strike rattled his arm. Sparks flashed. Inside the Tiger, the crew heard the metallic thud. "What was that?" the radio operator shouted. The commander looked through his periscope, but saw nothing. "Probably debris," he growled. "Keep firing." Dorokhin swung again, this time harder. The punch pierced deeper. Steam burst upward as a cooling pipe ruptured. The Tiger shuddered as pressure spiked. The engine howled. Inside, panic erupted. "We're overheating. Something's wrong with the engine." The driver tried to reverse, but the gears ground violently. A third strike from Dorokhin's punch pierced the ventilation housing. Smoke spewed out. The Tiger stalled, coughing like a dying animal. From the tree lean, the Soviets finally dared to rise from cover. A wave of rifle fire rained down on the immobilized tank. The Tiger's machine gun turret sprayed blindly in return. Its crew was disoriented, half choking, half terrified. A fourth strike, then a fifth. Each blow felt like swinging into the heart of a monster. Then the engine erupted in a shower of sparks and smoke. Flames flickered under the armor plating. Dorokhin rolled off the tank, hitting the snow hard as the Tiger's crew began shouting in panic. The driver tried again to start the engine, but all they got was a cough, then silence. A 50-ton beast dead. The Tiger's commander burst from the turret hatch, gasping for air as smoke billowed around him. But the moment he emerged, Soviet riflemen opened fire. The remaining crew scrambled out, some falling, some surrendering, some fleeing into the forest. The battlefield fell quiet except for the crackle of the burning engine. Dorokhin stood slowly, his legs shaking. Snow melted around the tank as flames licked across its rear deck. His hands stung from the cold and the repeated blows. But he didn't celebrate. He simply walked toward his comrades, the steel punch still in his hand. They stared at him in awe. One of the young soldiers whispered, "How did you know it would work?" Dorokhin took a moment before answering. "I've had 3 years to study these things. Nothing built by human hands is perfect." The story spread quickly through the division. They said he attacked a tiger with nothing but a metal rod. They said he killed it like a hunter striking a wolf's spine. Some exaggerated, others doubted. But the truth was staggering enough. A single sergeant, acting alone, had found the tiger's weak spot and exploited it with surgical precision. Tank experts would later confirm what Dorokhin already understood. The tiger's engine deck was its Achilles heel. Its cooling system, ventilation grills, and rear armor were far more vulnerable than the rest of the tank. Even a simple tool, if used correctly, could cripple the system. But for the Germans on that frozen road, it was more than a mechanical failure. It was unthinkable, because when they examined the ruined tank later, they found clear marks, perfectly aligned, deliberate strikes from a handheld tool. No explosives, no anti-tank rifles, just one man and a steel punch. The crew reportedly argued about it for months. Some insisted it had to be sabotage. Others said no infantryman would dare climb onto a tiger during battle. But the evidence was undeniable. Someone had, and for the first time, the mighty tiger felt truly mortal. The tiger burned for nearly 20 minutes before the flames died under the falling snow, leaving behind a trail of black smoke that curled upward into the gray winter sky. Soviet infantry advanced cautiously, rifles raised, expecting some final act of defiance from the ruined machine. But the tank remained silent, lifeless, its engine twisted, its steel plates buckled from the internal heat and pressure. Dorokhin stood a few meters away, breathing heavily in the cold air. His steel punch lay half buried in the snow, the tip scorched and blackened. The men gathered around him, exchanging looks of disbelief, admiration, and something else, an understanding that they had just witnessed a moment that would be retold long after the war ended. One of the younger soldiers approached the tiger's rear plate, touching it with his glove. It was still warm. He looked back at Dorokhin, shaking his head. "How did you even think of this?" Dorokhin didn't answer immediately. His eyes were fixed on the tree-line, listening for more engines, more tracks. Only when he was sure the danger had passed did he speak, his voice a low murmur beneath the wind. "You survived this long," he said, "and the battlefield starts teaching you things no manual ever will." The burning tiger had done more than stop the German push. It had stunned the enemy. Patrols approaching from the rear halted in confusion when they saw the thick column of smoke rising. Officers demanded explanations. Radio chatter buzzed with disbelief. A tiger abandoned, disabled at close range by infantry. No artillery, no mines. Impossible. The German regimental commander personally inspected the wreckage later that day. He circled the tank in silence, his boots crunching in the snow, his breath fogging the air. The tiger had been his spearhead, his pride, his certainty in battle. Now it sat motionless, its armor still gleaming beneath the soot, but its heart, the Maybach engine, destroyed. He climbed onto the rear deck, kneeling beside the ventilation grill. That's when he saw them, the marks. Deep, clean, purposeful strikes. He traced them with his gloved fingers, disbelief twisting his expression. This wasn't sabotage, he hissed to his staff officer. This was done during combat. The officer stared. By whom? The commander shook his head. Someone who shouldn't be alive. Across the battlefield, as the Soviets secured the area, Dorokhin sat on an ammunition crate, unwrapping cloth from around his bruised hands. His squad gathered around him, still buzzing with excitement. "You know they're going to write about this," said Corporal Yushkovich, shaking snow from his helmet. They'll put it in every newspaper from Leningrad to Vladivostok. Dorokhin gave a faint smile. Let them write whatever they want. Inside, though, he felt a weight. He knew what he'd done wasn't heroism in the way stories made it seem. It wasn't glory or bravery or even fury. It was survival. Pure, instinctive survival. He thought back to 1941, when German armor had swept across the plains like a steel tide. He remembered the helplessness, the feeling of being hunted. And now, 3 years later, fate had given him an opportunity to strike back at the very symbol of that fear. He hadn't wasted it. As evening fell, officers arrived to debrief the squad. They asked for diagrams, precise timings, and eyewitness accounts. Dorokhin explained everything clearly, calmly, without exaggeration. The officers listened, exchanging astonished glances. So, one said slowly, "You climbed onto a Tiger tank while it was firing and attacked the engine with a tool you sharpened yourself?" Dorokhin shrugged. "It was either that, or let it break through our line." The officer laughed, half in admiration, half in disbelief. "You understand what you've done? Command is going to want to hear this." But Dorokhin didn't care for medals or attention. When word later came that higher command wanted to award him a commendation, he politely refused the ceremony. He said the same thing he always said, "Give it to the boys who didn't come back." The story, however, spread on its own. Throughout the division, soldiers whispered about the sergeant who leapt onto a Tiger and killed it with nothing but a steel punch. It became a tale told in trenches, mess tents, and barracks, a reminder that even the mightiest machines had weaknesses, and that courage often came from the least expected places. Soviet tank crews heard it first, then infantry divisions, then entire regiments. And when the Red Army pushed westward in the coming months, the legend of Dorokhin followed like a shadow. Even German prisoners spoke of it. Rumors traveled fast along the Eastern Front. A Soviet infantryman had pierced a tiger's heart like a hunter striking down a bear. Some Germans refused to believe it. Others quietly admitted it was possible, because the battlefield was filled with moments too strange, too desperate, too human to fit into the official reports. But the ultimate proof remained on that snowy forest road. The disabled Tiger, its engine ruined by a weapon no one ever expected. For Dorokhin, the war continued much as it had before. Harsh, grinding, relentless. He fought in Poland, then into East Prussia, always staying near the front lines. His comrades said he never boasted, never told the story himself, never even mentioned the steel punch again. Years later, when asked about it, he simply replied, "We all did what we had to do." And that was the truth. War is not made of heroes and legends. It is made of moments, terrifying, unpredictable moments, when ordinary people are pushed beyond their limits. Moments when survival demands impossibilities. Moments when a quiet, frostbitten sergeant can change the outcome of a battle with his bare hands and a piece of sharpened steel. The Tiger, once a symbol of invincibility, became a smoking wreck on a frozen road because one man believed that no machine, no matter how fearsome, is without weakness. And that belief, combined with nerve, instinct, and iron resolve, turned the impossible into reality. Long after the war ended, veterans who fought alongside Dorokhin remembered that day with awe. They didn't talk about grand strategies or sweeping offensives. They talked about the moment they saw a single man climb onto a Tiger and bring it down. Because sometimes history isn't shaped by armies. Sometimes it's shaped by a sergeant with a steel punch, striking at the heart of a beast that thought itself immortal.